Right now, somewhere in the world, a man is losing everything. His business is collapsing. His relationships are falling apart. His mind is screaming at him that this is the end. And yet, he sits there calm, almost terrifyingly still, not because he does not feel the weight of his circumstances. He feels every ounce of it, but something inside him refuses to break. Something inside him knows a secret that most people will never understand. And by the end of this, you will know it too. Because what separates those who are destroyed by life and those who rise above it is not luck, not circumstances, not even intelligence. It is something far more subtle. It is the way they relate to their own minds. It is the invisible war they have already won before the external battle even begins. You have been lied to your entire life. You have been told that emotions are things that happen to you, that anger visits you like an unwelcome guest, that sadness descends upon you like weather, that fear grabs you by the throat and forces you into submission. But this is the greatest illusion ever sold to the human race. Emotions do not happen to you. You happen to them. And until you understand this, you will remain a slave to every passing feeling, every fleeting thought, every momentary impulse that arises in your nervous system. The Stoics understood this over 2,000 years ago. And what they discovered was not some cold, emotionless way of living. It was the exact opposite. It was the path to true freedom, the freedom to feel everything without being controlled by anything. Let us begin where all truth begins, with you, right now, in this very moment. There's a voice in your head. It never stops talking. It comments on everything. It judges, it worries, it replays the past, it rehearses the future. It tells you stories about who you are, what you deserve, what others think of you. And here is the terrifying part. You have spent your entire life believing that this voice is you, but it is not. This is where the Stoic journey begins. The recognition that there is something deeper than the voice. There is the one who hears the voice. There's the awareness behind the noise. And this awareness, this witnessing presence, this is where your true power lives. The Stoics called it the ruling reason, the inner citadel, the part of you that cannot be touched by external circumstances because it exists prior to your interpretation of those circumstances. Think about this carefully. When something happens to you, there is a gap, a tiny, almost imperceptible space between the event and your reaction. Most people live their entire lives without ever noticing this gap. They believe that the event causes the reaction directly. Someone insults them and anger arises. They lose money and panic floods their system. They face rejection and despair wraps around their chest like chains. But the Stoics saw something that changed everything. They saw that between the event and the reaction there is always a judgment, an interpretation, a story you tell yourself about what this event means. And this judgment, not the event itself, is what creates your emotional experience. This is not theory. This is the architecture of your inner world. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Imagine two people walking down the same street. A stranger bumps into both of them without apologizing. The first person immediately feels rage. How dare he? Does he think he is better than me? The disrespect, the audacity. His blood pressure rises, his muscles tense, his entire physiology shifts into combat mode. The second person barely notices. Perhaps the stranger is having a difficult day. Perhaps he is lost in worry about a sick family member. Perhaps he simply did not see me. And this person continues walking undisturbed, at peace. The same event, two completely different internal experiences. What was the difference? It was not the event was identical. The difference was the invisible story each mind created about what the event meant. This is the secret the Stoics encoded into their philosophy. You are not disturbed by things. You are disturbed by the views you take of things. And when you truly understand this, you hold in your hands the key to emotional freedom. But let us go deeper, because understanding this intellectually is not enough. You must feel it. You must live it. You must rewire the very way your mind processes reality. The ancient Stoics did not sit around discussing philosophy in comfortable rooms. They practiced every single day. They trained their minds the way athletes train their bodies. They knew that wisdom without practice is just entertainment. And so they developed methods, techniques, ways of confronting the chaos of life with unshakable inner stillness. One of the most powerful practices they used was something we might call the pause, the sacred pause before reaction. When you feel an emotion arising, especially a powerful one, you do not immediately act. You do not speak. You do not move. You pause. And in that pause, you ask yourself one simple question. What story is my mind telling me right now? This question is like a spotlight in a dark room. Suddenly, you see the machinery. You see the interpretation, and the moment you see it, it loses its power over you. This does not mean you become cold. This does not mean you feel nothing. The Stoics were not emotionless robots, despite what popular culture might tell you. They felt everything. Marcus Aurelius wept when his friends died. Seneca felt the sting of exile. Epictetus carried the trauma of slavery in his body. But they did not let these feelings become their masters. They learned to hold emotions the way you might hold a bird in your open palm. Gently, attentively, without grasping, without crushing, without letting it fly away unexamined. They felt the emotion fully, and then they chose their response. This is the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is unconscious, automatic, mechanical. Response is conscious, chosen, free. And the entire Stoic path is the journey from reaction to response, from slavery to sovereignty, from being lived by your emotions to living with your emotions as conscious allies. Now let us talk about something most people never consider, the role of desire in emotional suffering. You feel pain when reality does not match your expectations. Think about this. Every single time you suffer emotionally, there is a gap between what is and what you think should be. You wanted the promotion, but you did not get it. You wanted them to love you, but they left. You wanted respect, but you received indifference. The Stoics saw that the root of this suffering was not in the external situation, but in the internal attachment to a specific outcome. And so they developed a radical practice, not eliminating desire entirely, but holding desire loosely, preferring without demanding, wanting without needing, aiming without attaching your identity to the target. This is what they call the discipline of desire, training yourself to welcome whatever happens because you understand that your peace does not depend on circumstances aligning with your preferences. This brings us to one of the most misunderstood Stoic concepts, amor fati, the love of fate, not just accepting what happens, but actually loving it. This sounds impossible at first. How can I love suffering? How can I embrace loss? How can I welcome what breaks my heart? But the Stoics were not asking you to pretend pain is pleasure. They were pointing to something far more profound. They were asking you to recognize that you do not see the full picture. You never do. What looks like a disaster today might be the seed of your greatest transformation. What feels like an ending might be the necessary death that precedes rebirth. The universe is playing a game far more complex than your limited perspective can comprehend. And the Stoic learns to trust this, not blindly, not naively, but wisely, because resisting what has already happened is the definition of madness. It is arguing with reality, and reality always wins. Let us move now to mental dominance. This phrase might sound aggressive, but it is not about dominating others. It is about establishing sovereignty within your own mind. Most people are not the rulers of their inner kingdom. Their thoughts rule them. Their moods dictate their days. Their fears make their decisions, and they wonder why life feels so out of control. Mental dominance means reversing this hierarchy. It means taking your rightful place on the throne of your own consciousness. It means becoming the one who directs attention rather than the one whose attention is constantly hijacked. The Stoics understood that attention is the most precious resource you have. Where your attention goes, your life goes. And most people are giving away their attention for free to every passing distraction, every piece of bad news, every person who wants something from them. The mentally dominant person guards their attention like a dragon guards gold. They choose what enters their mind. They choose what they dwell on. They choose the stories they tell themselves. And this choice, exercised moment by moment, day by day, year by year, is what builds an unshakable mind. There is a practice the Stoics use that might seem dark, but is actually incredibly liberating. It is called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Each morning or each evening, they would deliberately imagine the worst things that could happen, not to become paranoid, not to attract negativity, but to inoculate themselves against the shock of misfortune. If you have already faced something in your imagination, it cannot ambush you in reality. Most people are terrified of even thinking about loss, death, failure. They push these thoughts away and live in a fragile bubble of denial. And then when life inevitably punctures that bubble, they shatter completely. The Stoic does the opposite. They invite the darkness in. They sit with it. They become familiar with it. And in doing so, they rob it of its power to destroy them. This is not pessimism. This is the ultimate realism. And from this realism comes a strange and beautiful peace. The peace of someone who has already made friends with the worst-case scenario. What can the world do to someone who has already faced everything in their mind? Now we must speak about something essential, the obstacle itself. Most people see difficulties as things that block their path. They spend their energy cursing the obstacle, wishing it were not there, waiting for conditions to improve before they take action. The Stoic sees things differently. The obstacle is not blocking the path. The obstacle is the path. Every difficulty you face is not a deviation from your training. It is your training. That difficult person at work, that is your teacher in patience. That failure you experienced, that is your course in resilience. That heartbreak that nearly destroyed you, that was forging you into someone who can love without losing themselves. The mentally dominant person does not ask, why is this happening to me? They ask, what is this asking of me? They look at every challenge as raw material for growth. And when you adopt this perspective, something magical happens. You stop fearing difficulty. You almost start to welcome it, because you know that on the other side of every struggle is a stronger, wiser, more capable version of yourself. Let us address the inner critic now, that voice that tells you you are not enough, that points out every flaw, that reminds you of every failure. Most people try to fight this voice. They argue with it. They try to silence it. But this rarely works. The Stoic approach is different. Instead of fighting the voice, you question it. You become curious about it. You ask, where did this voice come from? Whose words is it actually speaking? Often you will find that your inner critic is just an echo of some authority figure from your past. A parent, a teacher, a society that taught you shame before it taught you self-worth. And when you see this, the voice loses its divine authority. It becomes what it actually is. Just another thought, just another interpretation, just another story that you are free to believe or not believe. We must also speak about the role of the body in emotional mastery. The Stoics were not disembodied philosophers floating in abstract thought. They knew that the body and mind are one system. Your posture affects your mood. Your breath affects your thoughts. The way you move through the world changes the way you experience the world. When you feel anxiety rising, your breath becomes shallow and rapid. When you feel calm, your breath is slow and deep. The Stoics use this knowledge. They train themselves to breathe consciously, to relax the body deliberately, to notice physical tension and release it before it became emotional turmoil. This is practical wisdom. This is applied philosophy, and it works. Right now, as you hear these words, notice your body. Notice if your shoulders are tense. Notice if your jaw is clenched. Notice if your breathing is shallow. And without forcing anything, allow yourself to soften. Allow your exhale to lengthen. This is not separate from Stoic philosophy. This is Stoic philosophy in action. There is something else the Stoics knew that modern psychology is only beginning to understand. The power of perspective. Most of your suffering comes from being trapped in a single perspective. The perspective of the isolated self who takes everything personally. But you are not as separate as you think. You are not as important as your ego insists. And this is not an insult. This is freedom. When you zoom out and see yourself as one tiny human on a small planet in a vast universe, something shifts. Your problems do not disappear, but they become proportional. When you realize that billions of humans have faced similar struggles throughout history, you feel less alone. When you remember that this body will one day return to the earth, you stop wasting time on petty concerns. This is the Stoic practice of taking the view from above, seeing your life from a cosmic perspective. It is not about minimizing your experience. It is about putting it in context, and context changes everything. Mental dominance also requires understanding the nature of time. You have 3 relationships with time: past, present, future, and most of your emotional suffering comes from mismanaging these relationships. You replay the past obsessively, torturing yourself with regret, resentment, shame, but the past is gone. It exists only in memory. And memory is notoriously unreliable. You are essentially suffering over a story, a reconstruction, a ghost. You project into the future anxiously, imagining disasters that may never happen. But the future is not real either. It is a fantasy, a projection. You are suffering over a dream. The only time that is real is now. This moment, this breath, this word entering your awareness. The Stoics anchored themselves in the present because they understood that now is the only place where life actually happens. The past and future are mental constructs, useful sometimes, torturous when taken too seriously. The mentally dominant person learns to visit the past and future when necessary, but always returns home to the present. We must now discuss the hardest part of this path, consistency. Understanding these principles is easy. Living them is difficult. There will be days when you forget everything you know, when old patterns take over, when you react instead of respond, when you lose yourself in emotion and only remember your training after the damage is done. This is normal. This is human. The Stoics did not expect perfection from themselves or from you. What they expected was commitment, the commitment to return to the path every time you stray, the commitment to treat every failure as another opportunity to practice, the commitment to keep showing up day after day, year after year, even when progress feels invisible. This is what separates those who transform their lives from those who just collect wisdom. Like decoration, it is not about never falling. It is about how quickly you get back up. As we approach the end of this exploration, let us return to where we began, to that man sitting calmly in the midst of chaos. What does he know that others do not? He knows that his circumstances do not define him. He knows that emotions are visitors, not permanent residents. He knows that every external event is neutral until his mind assigns it meaning. He knows that resistance to reality causes more suffering than reality itself. He knows that difficulty is the raw material of growth. He knows that death is always over his shoulder, making every moment precious. He knows that he is not his thoughts, not his feelings, not his body, but the awareness in which all these arise. And this knowing, this deep experiential understanding is what gives him his power. Not power over others, power over himself. And that is the only power that matters. You have been given a map now, but a map is not the territory. You must walk the path yourself. You must practice when no one is watching. You must catch yourself in the act of suffering and ask, what story am I believing right now? You must face your fears in imagination before they arrive in reality. You must breathe consciously when your body wants to panic. You must question the voice that tells you you are not enough. You must zoom out when you are trapped in the tunnel of self-absorption. You must return to the present when your mind wanders to past regret or future anxiety. You must love your fate even when it breaks your heart. This is the Stoic way. This is how you control emotions without suppressing them. This is how you build mental dominance without becoming a tyrant. This is how you become free while living in a world that is constantly trying to enslave you. The path is simple. The practice is lifelong. And you can begin right now, not tomorrow, not when conditions improve. Now, in this breath, in this moment of awareness. The choice is yours. It has always been yours. And that is the greatest truth of all.